Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another week of our psychoeducation group for grief. I really appreciate you tuning in here today. I know this is a little bit different because up to this point, we've been doing these sessions on Tuesdays. And tonight we're having to do this on a Wednesday because we were having some technical difficulties yesterday trying to get our streaming service going and just couldn't get it done yesterday. I'm having to do it here today on a Wednesday. And as you notice, I'm not where I typically am. I'm actually at my in-laws house right now, but still able to get this done. But I apologize for the any inconveniences here or the differences in the recording here today. Um, but I do appreciate you tuning in, and I hope that you can learn something here tonight from this session. I do want to invite you to share these videos. I encourage you to share these videos because we want, to get the word out to help people, right? We want to help people who are grieving, who are hurting, who are struggling. And so we ask that you share these videos or point people to these videos to help them get through whatever it is they're going through, whatever that loss is that they're facing. Also, we do some other groups. Um, some other clinicians are starting groups here. I'm also doing a couples group on Fridays, so tune in for those as well. But again, appreciate you being here. Today we got another really important topic. Actually, we're going to cover two different topics. So, number one, we're going to look at grief in children, and then we're going to look at the role of faith in grief, or how faith can help us, or religion can help us in our times of grief. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at here today. And the reason why I wanted to do these topics is because most of this has been aimed at adults, like working through loss. And that's, I think, where our minds typically go to is, an adult losing someone or something. But I really wanted to look at children because it's different in children, right? It's children do not have the same capacities as adults do, and so it's going to look a little bit different in children. And we need to know what to look for. We need to know how to help them navigate grief as adults and caregivers. So that's what we'll look at. And then the role of faith in grief, like again, I've said that I'm a minister before. I believe in these groups in the past sessions. And I certainly believe that faith can help us in times of grief, but it's not just my belief. Research bears that out. And so that's another important thing to look at and to consider. So that's what we're going to be looking at here tonight. I'm going to try to keep this at about the same time that we've been doing these, around 50 minutes to an hour. So, hopefully this could be helpful to you. But let's start off by looking at grief in children first, and then we'll look at the role of faith in grief. So here's a little bit of an overview about children and grief. Number one, children do not grieve the same as adults. They just don't. Again, children do not have the same capacities, faculties as adults do, right? They have not had near as many experiences as adults have. Their brains are not fully developed. They're not emotionally aware, and things like that, right? So they're not able to process things like adults are and to express things like adults are. So it's going to look a little bit different, right? In children. And we'll look at how that is a little bit different here in a little bit, but just understand that it's gonna be a lot different in children, simply just because of where they are developmentally, right? And, no children no child, really should be able to grieve exactly like an adult should, right? Because they're just not there yet. So they're not gonna grieve the same. So we wanna look at some differences there and some things to look at, some common reactions to grief for children here in a minute. Children generally are aware of death, but may not understand it fully. Now, obviously, like an infant or even like toddler, like I have a 2-year-old daughter right now, and she has no clue what death is, right? But like we're talking about getting a little bit older into childhood, maybe even 3 or 4. They probably are aware of death because it shows up in cartoons, and in movies, right? Like even Disney movies, right? We see death in those, and so children may be exposed to that early on, and they may be aware of that, but they're not going to grasp it fully, right? By the way, the word child is a really broad term. Like we could be talking about infancy all the way up to like teenage people, teenagers and adolescents. So obviously in adolescence, they're going to be way more aware and understanding of death. But I guess we're talking about like 3 to 4 to like maybe even 10 or 11. They may not understand it fully. Meaning, like, some may think like, okay, someone passes away where they're just gone for a little while. They'll come back, or they're sleeping and they'll wake up one day, because like again in movies and books and whatnot, um, there are times where people will die, but they'll come back, right? In a movie, in a book or something like that, and they may get that idea. So they don't understand maybe the permanency of death. They may not understand completely the effects of what has happened. So that's something to be aware of as well. Thirdly, here, children may go from crying to playing in a matter of minutes, right? So how children express themselves, talking especially, younger children, is through play, right? That is their world, is expressing their way, their life through play, and that it is very very meaningful to them. And like my daughter is getting there at this point where like she's playing all the time with her little people, right? I think they're Fisher Price little people. She loves to play, and she starts talking while she's playing, and it's cute as all get out, but that's just how children act. And even in times of distress, that's not just going to stop. It's not just going to cut off. Like they could be sad one minute and then go back to playing one minute. And just because they do that doesn't mean that they're done with grieving or they're done with sadness. It's just play is such an important integral part of their life that they may bounce back and forth between sadness and play, so on and so forth. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. Just wanted to make you kind of aware of that. And that's kind of one of the different ways that children will grieve. Lastly, and this may seem like a duh statement here, but I wanted to say it, parents and caregivers must help children navigate grief. We can't expect children to just get through it on their own and expect them to handle it all on their own. We may have to hold their hand and carry them, not may, we will have to hold their hand and carry them through because they don't know. Again, they don't have the faculties, the abilities that we do, adults do to navigate this. And so as caregivers, as parents, it's our responsibility to help our kids. Now, we're going to say this in a minute too, that we never need to ignore our own grief, but we also need to help our kids through their grief as well, right? They're our responsibility, and we need to help them navigate these tough times. We can't leave it to them to do it alone. So that's a little bit of an overview, just kind of looking at kind of where we're going to go from here with this. So let's move on to looking at some reactions that children are going to have to grief. And let me remove these captions because the source is down there. And this comes from betterhealth.gov. Um, so here's some common reactions. Number one, grieving in doses. And I kind of already mentioned this, but children may go from 1 minute playing, watching movies, reading books, so on and so forth, to playing. I'm sorry, I just said that. They may be reading, playing, so on and so forth, to grieving, right? To being really sad. And it just may come in doses, but they may then take a break and like go back to playing. And it may seem odd, it may seem strange, like why does that happen? But again, it's just kids express themselves in play. Kids, that's very, very important to them. And that's just how it works for them. It's not going to be a consistent thing, maybe like an adult, grieving consistently. It's different for children. And so watch for that. That's a common reaction, and it's not something odd or abnormal for a child to grieve in those doses. Acting out feelings. I'm not exactly sure what was meant by that on this website, but I think what they may be saying here is instead of expressing how they feel, because they may not be able to put the words together, they may act out their feelings. It may come out in behaviors. And so if they're feeling angry, they may not say, hey, I'm feeling angry. Or if they're sad, they may not say, hey, I'm feeling sad. It may be more of an action oriented thing for a child. Again, not able to express as well as an adult. So maybe acting out how they feel instead of being able to speak it. Changes in eating, sleeping, and behavior patterns is a normal reaction. And so if you notice that your child is not eating as much or eating more, not sleeping as much or sleeping too much, or acting out, things like that, that is a normal reaction to grief, right? Grief is a huge um, grief obviously means that there's been a loss. Loss indicates a big time change, whether it be the loss of a loved one, maybe even like for a child, like moving and losing friends and things like that. Like that's a big change in anyone's life, especially a child when they're still developing and things are still changing. So it's not uncommon for like eating and sleeping and behavior patterns to change, to be altered during this time. And so don't be completely struck if you see that happening. But it is important to help them maintain healthy eating patterns, sleep, and good behavior, right? Um, Wanting to sleep in bed with an adult, and this makes complete sense, right? Like even if they don't anymore, like our daughter still sleeps with us, and we love it. But as children age, typically they stop sleeping with an adult. But during this time, they may want to come back and sleep in bed, and many kids do that during the night, anyways. But like especially during this time, wanting that connection, wanting to not be alone. And they may want to sleep with their parent or grandparent, whatever it may be. And let's just be honest, folks. At night, things seem to get worse. Seem things to be a little bit harder at night. That's just how it is, and so it may be that way for children, and they may get scared anyways at night, right? So they, especially during this time of grief and loss, they may want to sleep with an adult. Displaying younger behavior such as wetting the bed or sucking their thumb can be a common reaction here. So kind of like regressing to a previous stage in childhood is a part of can be a reaction to grief. It's just kind of part of what may take place. Maybe again taking some regression and going back to a pattern of behavior in a previous developmental stage. And so again, don't be struck or surprised if your child starts wetting the bed again or sucking their thumb or holding a particular toy or whatever it may be, displaying these younger behaviors. That's a common reaction. Being angry, frustrated, restless. This There are some overlap with some adult reactions to grief like this. Like we've talked about this, the stages of grief: anger, being frustrated, having that resentment. That's a common reaction even for adults, being restless, right? So that may show up also in children. Now it may be look different, like it may be more animated or whatever, but this is a common reaction to be angry, frustrated, restless for a child. The next one, really important one: lacking concentration and energy at school. um, a child may start kind of struggling at school. And children, a lot of children already struggle to do that. But again, with something as big and life changing as loss, that can really impact the concentration, really impact the energy levels, and so can start leading to a drop in performance at school. Like both physically, mentally. So watch out for that, and again, don't be surprised by that because that's a common reaction for things to kind of change at school. And so we obviously are not gonna say pull them out of school, but it may be worth kind of looking at, speaking to teachers and telling them that there may be times where days where they may need to be pulled out of school, where they may need to kind of just have a little bit of a break, or to sit out of a certain activity or something, like I don't know. But they may lack concentration, energy at school, and their teachers, I think, should be aware of that. Lastly, feeling responsible for their parents. Again, I'm not exactly sure what was meant by this from betterhelp.gov, but I'm guessing what may be in for like older children in particular is feeling responsible for helping their parents get through grief, right? Like my parent is so down right now and in such great hurt and pain, and it's my responsibility to help them get through this, to do whatever I can, to help them get through this time. And so maybe that's what they meant by that. And they, especially those older, like 12 and up, maybe they may feel responsible for their parents. Then, so those are some common reactions to grief, and this is not an exhaustive list. I just thought these are ones that were really important, and so again, these are some things to look for and some things to notice um, in a child when they're grieving. And again, don't be surprised by these things because they're typical, normal reactions to grief. It's a really big change, when you lose something. So, what can you do to help a child through grief? Okay, number one, encourage them and help them to express their feelings. Encourage them and help them to express their feelings. We've already talked about how important it is when we are, by the way, this comes from childmind.org. That's the source down there. I want to give credit where credit's due. It's really important for anybody to not keep our feelings inside, to not harbor them inside, but to be open with them and to understand that it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to not really want to do a certain activity anymore or something like that during this time of grief, right? It's okay. That is a common thing to feel those things. And so we don't want to keep those things and pent up inside and harbor them inside. We want to express those things, and so we need to encourage that in our children. Again, they may not know to do that. They may not understand how to do that. We need to encourage them to express their feelings, then help them to express their feelings. So what are some things we can do to help them express their feelings? Well, again, play for many children is so very important. And so playing with them, like we do play therapy. That's not something that I am really skilled in. I don't do that with a lot of clients because I just don't have children as clients. I've seen a few adolescents, but that's it. We have other clinicians who do see children, and play is a really important part of the counseling with those children. We have a lot of toys, dolls, games, things like that in the office. And when children start playing, they're in their element, and things may just start to come out. Things may just start to surface when a child, I'm sorry, when a child starts to play. And so maybe get them to play and then start, talking about these things, and some things may come out. And, they may say something like, well, I feel really sad right now. And you say, okay, well, tell me about that sadness, right? And so encouraging them and helping them to express their feelings. Play may help. Reading books, right? There are books that are related to grief that kind of touch on grief and how to, navigate that. Movies, there are some movies where these themes come up. You can maybe even talk to them about that. But like, just encourage them and help them to express their feelings and tell them, like, it's okay to feel this way. Like, I'm sad too. I'm hurting too. And it's okay to talk about that. So encourage them, help them to express those feelings. That's really going to be helpful for them instead of them keeping it inside, not really knowing what to do with it. Also, I don't have this on here, but counseling can really help. And I know I've said that a lot throughout this grief group, but again, we do have clinicians who see children, and I think that could be very beneficial for um, your children who are grieving. We can help them through those times. So expressing those feelings and helping them to get to that point where they can do that is really important. Number two, be developmentally appropriate, right? Be developmentally appropriate, meaning that what an infant is able to understand and do is not going to be the same for like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, right? Like we've got to be developmentally appropriate and understand that there are some things that are not going to be appropriate to say to like a 5-year-old as compared to like again a 15-year-old, right? And so we've got to be developmentally appropriate and aware of where our children are and kind of meet them where they are at that level, right? So, um, there are some phrases that are out there, like they've passed away, right? With a 15-year-old saying that they've passed away, a 15-year-old's going to get that they've died. But like with a 5-year-old, they may not understand what it means to pass away, right? So you be a little bit more, you may have to be a little bit more direct with like a 5-year-old or something like that, right? And kind of tell them that they're gone and they're not coming back. And I know that may sound harsh. We're not saying be harsh, right? What we're saying is that, for a 5-year-old, saying certain things is going to be much different than saying things like a 15-year-old or even like a 10-year-old, right? So be developmentally appropriate and aware of the differences that are going to take place within, you know, a a younger child and an older child, and kind of meet them at that level where they're at, and kind of tailor how you're helping them to their age, right? And like a 15-year old's not going to be, you know probably not going to like sit down and play with dolls, right? So that's not going to be developmentally appropriate for them as they grieve. So just be developmentally appropriate and aware of the differences in children. Um, that's just another one here. Number three is be direct. I've kind of already touched on this, and again, this may sound like counterintuitive, but there are some common phrases that are used that, right, they're really not helpful, and a lot of children are not going to understand them. Right, even, like, there are some times where, like, sleep is used as, like, a metaphor for death, like, they fell asleep, right? Like, that type of thing, they children are not gonna understand that. They're like, "Oh, well, if they're sleeping, well, they'll just wake up," you know? And again, like, movies, books, things like that, like, they may have given these children ideas about death that are not correct, and so it's important to not really, um I don't know if sugarcoat's the right word, but it's important to just kind of tell them what, like, they've died. They're gone, this person or whatever that maybe it's not even a death, maybe they've just you've lost something else, like, again, lost a friendship or something like that. You moved away, we're not going to be able to go back to school there, right? Don't try to, like, put a metaphor on it or whatever it may be. Just kind of be direct and say it's gone. Like, we're not going to be able to get that back, because they're going to understand it a lot more if you're able to just kind of be direct with them. And does not mean to be mean or to be harsh or anything like that. Absolutely not. It's just kids cannot understand things like adults can. And so being more direct is going to be more helpful for them in the end. Next here, discuss the funeral, right? Discuss the funeral with a child. Folks, I didn't go to my first funeral till I was well into my teens. I think it was my Meemaw's funeral when I was, like in my junior year of high school. Well, no, I went to some funerals before that actually, but still, it was way later in life that I actually went to a funeral. And folks, funerals can be scary. Like, they can be events that are really, really scary for children and really, really different for children. And so it's important to discuss that with them and prepare them for it, right? Discuss what's going to happen. Like, there may be crying here. You may see some things that are a little bit different, right? Like, kind of explain it to them. And here's the thing, don't make them go. I know that may sound strange. And especially if somebody you're related to, I think that's probably important to go if they're related. But I guess there could be cases where it would be better if a child did not go to a funeral, and it may scare them more or hurt them more in the long run, because there are other ways to have like a meaning making experience for the departed, the person who has passed away, the person who is now gone. There's other things that you can do, to memorialize them in that kid's mind, aside from a funeral. And a funeral, especially with like an open casket, that can be something really difficult for a child to see. And so you may want to prepare them for that, or maybe not let them see that part of the funeral, but be open about the funeral and discuss it if you're going to take your child to the funeral, and just let them know some of the things that are going to be going on there and what they may see. Um, and just kind of prepare them for it, right? Because you don't want them to get there and be caught off guard and be shocked and scared. So discuss the funeral with them, because that can be a really, really difficult thing, even for adults. So be mindful of that as well. Next thing, discuss the afterlife, right? Discuss the afterlife. I know not everybody is religious. I know not everybody believes in an afterlife, but if you do, this is something important to discuss and something important to talk about, because it's a key fact, especially in like Christianity, because that's what I'm familiar with. As a minister, I'm a Christian minister, and so I'm very familiar with that. And I don't want to dive in too much into this because I want to talk about it when we talk about faith, but it can be really helpful if you do believe in the afterlife to discuss, well, we will see Meemaw again. Like, I believe I'm going to see my Meemaw again in heaven, and things like that. Like, discuss the afterlife to kind of frame it for them, and that this is not the end for seeing their relative. If their relative followed Christianity as well, or followed whatever faith it is that you believe in, right? So discuss the afterlife and talk about those things with them, and it can provide a sense of hope for them. And again, I know not everybody believes in that, not everybody holds to those beliefs, but it can be helpful if you do believe in that. Next here, don't ignore your own grief. One of the worst things you can do is to not work through your own process as well. Like if you've got kids who are grieving, you're trying to help. Obviously, you're probably grieving too. Don't ignore your grief. Don't put that on the back burner. Don't put that to the side. Make sure that you are open and that you are still working through your own process. Because if you're not working through your own process and you are stuck in grief, you're not going to be as effective for your child or whoever you're helping the kid through grief. So you need to be able to work through your own grief as well. Don't ignore it. Keep pressing on in it as well, and try to work through those stages of grief that we talked about. And it's just going to be really, really tough to help your child fully if you aren't engaging in your own process of grief. Um, so don't ignore your own grief. Don't put that on the back burner. We're not saying to ignore your child either, right? Can't do that either. But again, you're not going to be able to be fully there for your child if you're not helping yourself, if you're not trying to work through it, the grief as well. So don't ignore your own grief. It's important as well. And finally, stick to routines for kids during first of all, routines are helpful for kids, period, right? And so just kind of giving them what to expect is a good thing. So trying to stick to routines during this time will be really important, right? The more things change, the more traumatic and the more hurtful it's going to be for a child when things are changing, right? Kids can't adapt as well as adults, right? Kids are not able to navigate it, are not able to deal with change as well as adults. People don't like change, period. And so for kids, especially, it's a little bit harder. So sticking to a routine, if you can somehow stick to that, and if there's a time where you know what, you need to get out and you need to kind of grieve yourself and whatever it may be, trying to find somebody to kind of help with that. Maybe it's a grandparent or a friend who can help stick to a routine. It's important, to stick to a routine and keep things as normal as possible for your child. Again, this is not to ignore the grief. This is not to um, put it to the side. It's just to help your child maintain that sense of normalcy. Help them maintain that sense that everything's going to be okay, that life does move on, even though something has changed. Things still have to move on, and things will still move on, and it's going to be okay. And so, sticking to a routine is really, really important. And let me just say this, it's not on here, but helping a child who's grieving, something really important is just to let them know that you're there, right? And it's way more than just saying that you're going to be there. It's showing up, right? And we talked about this last week, how you can help support someone who is grieving. It's no different for a child, right? And I would say, especially for a child, for them to know that you're there as a parent, as a caregiver, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, whatever it may be, or just a friend, right? Just to let them know that you're there and to show them that you're there, that you care is huge for a child. It is so very important. And folks, you can do wonders for a child by just letting them know that you're there, right? The worst thing that you could do is to retract and not be there for them during this time. And that's really going to be difficult for them because that children rely on caregivers, rely on parents, grandparents, or whoever it may be, whoever their guardians are. And so if you retract, it's going to be even more hurtful for them. So be there, be there for them and just show up. That is so very important. So these are some things for helping children who are grieving, and some things to look for. Again, well, I won't go all the way back. I'd have to press a lot of buttons to go all the way back to the previous slide. But those are some things to look for in children who are grieving and to help children who are grieving. And I hope that you found something helpful there. I think kind of the main thing is to know that it's not going to be the same. And by the way, it's not going to be same for every child, but there's going to be some similarities. But it's not the same as adults grieving, right? And we got to be aware, and we got to be developmentally appropriate for kids in their time of grief. So let's look really quickly, and we'll stick on this too long, but I do want to look at faith and grief. And unfortunately, that cut off my slide there. And we'll have to remember that source at the bottom. But this is a quote I'll read in just a minute. But faith and grief. I know not everybody believes in God. I know not everybody has a religion that they are tied to. Certainly, as a minister, I would encourage you to pursue religion and faith, but can't force anybody to do that, right? But I do want to talk about this because it is important for so many people, billions and billions of people. Faith and religion is so very important. And during times of grief, whether you believe in it or not, research shows that faith, religious practice, spirituality can be helpful in times of grief. And it can be something that can really, really be helpful, and something that can really provide a boost during a time of bereavement. So, look at this quote. I believe it's Walsh et al., Walsh and others from 2002. This is um, like scholarly journal article. So this is not just something offline. This is not just something, that somebody just said randomly. It's a legit study that was done. So look what they say, Walsh and others. They say people reporting no spiritual belief had not resolved their grief by 14 months after the death. Participants with strong spiritual beliefs resolved their grief progressively over the same period. People with low levels of belief showed little change in the first 9 months, but thereafter resolved their grief. People who profess stronger spiritual beliefs seem to resolve their grief more rapidly and completely after the death of a close person than do people with no spiritual beliefs. Right. Again, this is a scholarly article done as research, and this is their findings that um, people reporting no spiritual beliefs struggled to resolve their grief more so than those who do have those spiritual beliefs. That was some of the research that they found. And even people with low levels of belief, people who may believe, but not really are that's not really like the most salient thing in their life, maybe not the most important thing in their life. They had low levels of belief. There was little change in the first 9 months, but thereafter were able to resolve their grief, right? And so people with stronger religious beliefs, it seems that they more rapidly come to terms with the death and work through that more so than those who have no spiritual beliefs. Now, this is not true across the board, right? I'm sure there are some. In fact, I know some who had strong, very strong spiritual beliefs, and the death of a loved one completely almost, destroyed their faith, and they were unable to work through it. But for the most part, those I know so many others who have lost a loved one, who have lost or lost something important to them, and their faith was the thing that pulled them through. And that's what they cite as the reason, or one of the main reasons why they were able to get through. And so faith and grief, faith can really, really be helpful during times of grief and distress. So I wanted to talk about that and to touch on that here today. So let's look very quickly at some reasons why faith can be so very helpful when it comes to the grieving process and what it can provide. So look at this next slide here. Hopefully it'll there it goes. Faith and grief. Number one, faith provides a place to turn to in times of grief. So um faith does not completely eradicate grief. Faith is not if you have faith and you will never grieve, right? It's not like a replacement for grief. And it's not wrong if you have faith to grieve, right? Um, Faith just simply provides a place to turn two times in grief. It's a safe haven, if you will, for many in times of grief. It's a place to run to during times of grief. It can provide some encouragement. Don't want to jump too far, but That's something that so many people turn to during times of grief and distress is faith and religious practices and spirituality. And and that's what faith can provide. It's an avenue to turn to. And for many people, it's the only thing that they have to turn to. They may not have family, may not have a lot of social support like friends. And so faith is kind of that thing that they turn to most and find strength in. So it can provide a place to turn to during times of grief. Number two, faith provides hope in the face of grief. I've said this many times, and this is kind of touching again on that afterlife stuff that we mentioned a few minutes ago, right? I'm a minister at a church here in Mobile, Alabama, and I certainly believe that there is eternal life awaiting those who follow Jesus Christ. And I believe that those who have passed on before me, like my Meemaw was a faithful Christian, my Pawpaw the same way, I believe that I'm going to see them again. And that is so very comforting to me that after this life, it's not over. Like, I get to see my loved ones that I have missed, that I have really, really, missed and really, really long to see again, right? I will get to see them again, and that's encouraging. Like, that's comforting and provides that hope that, this is not the end. When someone does pass away, like, I'll get to see them again, right? And luckily, I have not had a whole lot of, people who have, passed away, in my life that are close to me. My Meemaw and Pawpaw are kind of, the main ones in my life close to me who have passed away, but I believe I'll see them again, right? And again, I know that there's a lot of different religious beliefs about the afterlife out there. I know that, again, not everybody believes in an afterlife, but I certainly do. And so many do as well. But that's what the Bible teaches, that there is an afterlife, and that those who have been, faithful to Jesus Christ and have placed their faith and trust in Him and followed His commands will receive eternal life. And that's comforting to know that so many who have gone on before us that we will be able to see again. That provides hope, like, and also to know that like there's something awaiting us beyond this life. It's comforting, right? It's comforting in the face of grief. But here's the thing: even if you haven't lost even if you haven't lost a loved one, or you're not going through grieving over the death of somebody, again, grief can happen in many other ways, and still faith can provide hope, right? Because there are so many passages about hope. There are so many things in scripture that provide hopeful things to get through. Like, there are people in the Bible who grieved, right? I can think about David, right? David sinned. This is King David in the Bible. David sinned against God by committing adultery and taking another man's wife and having that man murdered. And God, told him that because of his sins, that there was going to be punishment. And the child that was conceived through that adultery ended up passing away. And he knew that was coming, right? He knew that was part of the punishment, and he was grieving that. He was hurting that that was going to take place, but he found comfort in God, and he got up and he worshipped after it all happened, and he pressed on in the faith. And yes, he made a lot of great mistakes, big mistakes, but he still found hope in God. And so it can provide hope even in the face of grief, even in times where we're feeling down and we've done bad things. Faith can provide hope in those instances. So faith provides hope in the face of grief. Number three, faith provides encouragement in times of grief. Faith provides encouragement in times of grief. Again, there are so many passages in scripture that can be so encouraging and so comforting, especially in times of grief and pain and distress. Think about Psalm 46, verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, and ever present help, or a very present help in trouble, right? That's very comforting to know that God is a refuge and strength, that we can run to Him and find strength, find what we're looking for, what we need. And so many other passages, right? There are passages about God never leaving us or forsaking us, to be strong and courageous and not afraid, right? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that's a Psalm 23, Psalm 23, not verse 1, but down the line in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. And so there's so many comforting and encouraging passages in times of grief. And even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in the Bible, there are still so many encouraging things for you to look at and for you to see. Encouraging words, inspiring men and women who did great things, even in the face of danger and loss. And so there's a lot of encouragement that can be found in with faith in times of grief. But also, faith provides connection during times of grief, right? Faith um, connects us to God, right? And through the scriptures and through prayer, we connect with God, and we can still have that connection. That even though we've lost a loved one, or we've lost a job, or we've lost our home, or whatever it may be, we still have God, and we still have that connection, that relationship with Him, and that is really really comforting. That is really really helpful to know that we have that connection, right? And again, again, I know not everybody believes, but that's so important that if you do believe, you have that connection with God, you have that connection with the Lord. And again, I'd encourage you, if you don't believe, study, right? Study and research these things about faith, and come to a conclusion yourself on that. I'd encourage you to search scriptures and to kind of look at what it says. It can be so very comforting. And I rely on God, and I know so many of you do. And it can provide connection, but not only connection with God, but connection with others, right? A big part of scripture is connection with others, right? The Bible tells us that we are created for connection. That doesn't There's not a verse that exactly says that, but God created us as relational beings. What I mean is there's no verse that actually says those exact words, humans were created for connection. But we see all throughout scripture, the idea that humans were made to be in relationship with God and with other human beings. We see that at the beginning, God saw that it wasn't good for man to be alone, so He created woman for the man. And ever since then, humans have been in relationship, and God desires His people to be in relationships and connection with one another. And so, the church, right? I'm a minister at a church, and when people lose loved ones, when they lose something important to them, we shower them with love and support. And so many people in our church are taking people meals, are visiting with them, are comforting them, writing them cards, right? So it keeps this connection with other people as well. And so faith can be so very important during times of grief. I think you can see how important it is. And I'll go back again to this quote, right? This is based on scholarly research. This is not just something that I'm saying. It's not just something that a random person saying. These are people in the field of psychology and counseling who researched this and found that those who had spiritual beliefs seemed to progress through grief quicker and work through it quicker because of all these things that we talked about, right? There's so many comforting things in relation to faith and religion that can be so very helpful, right? And not to mention, like, it can provide meaning to our lives, right? Like, it provides purpose to our lives, even if something, you've lost something, or you've experienced the death of a loved one, right? Faith can still be that meaning and purpose in your life, right? It can be what helps you press on even during these tough times. And that kind of connects to hope as well, like the things we hope for most are the things that we're going to pursue. And so, faith can be really, really helpful. And I'm really passionate about this. You probably can tell, because I am a minister, and I do believe in God, and I want as many people as possible to believe in God as well. But I do know that it can be so very helpful in times of distress, in times of pain, and in times of loss. Faith can be very, very helpful. So, those are the things we wanted to talk about here today. And I would encourage you to, if you're not a believer and you don't have any faith or religious background, start researching it. Start at least looking into it. And if you're a skeptic and don't, believe in God at all for some reason, search some evidence, and look into it a little bit more, because it really can be so very helpful, not just for grief, but for many other things. And that's just what we're talking about here with it. But children, in their grieving process is a lot different. We looked at some signs or some common reactions for grief in children and some ways that we can help children during grief. And then we looked at the fact that faith can be very helpful in times of grief and how faith can be very helpful during times of grief. Um, I hope that you learned something out of this, and I hope that you will share this with those who are needing to hear it, who are wanting to learn more about it, and maybe there are some that you know who have children who are grieving, and they need to see something like this, or who need to know that faith can be helpful during times of grief. Pass this on to them. Maybe you have questions, and I'd encourage you. I'm so sorry I haven't done well with this. If you've got questions or concerns, please let us know. You can send us a message. You can look at, you can send us a message if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. Put it in the comments. You can also call us. Go just type in Joanna Snow Ministries, and you'll find the number. Or Really Living Today Counseling. You'll find the number. You can reach out to us that way. I'd love to answer any questions, and maybe doing a Q&A would be helpful, right? To kind of just go through some questions that you guys may have about grief, and answer some of those things. But maybe you just have some thoughts. If you want to share those with us, let us know as well. But I'd encourage you to, if you need counseling, we are here to help. We want to help. We encourage you to reach out and to let us know, and we would love to get with you and to help you through whatever it is you're going through, whether it be grief or not. We want to help, and we can help you, and we'd love to. So, again, really appreciate you tuning in today. Hope that there was something helpful here for you, and I wish you guys all